Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Well, welcome to Lead Live, LEAD standing for Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand. It's an honor to be with you once again, and it's a special honor to have a gentleman by the name of Devon Gaster join us today on the topic of men creating peace. And we're going to engage in what I love to call real talk. We're honored to have remarkable guests who have many diverse kinds of leadership experiences, and all of them intentionally moved into the spaces that we recognize on Lead Live or at Lead Live. This gentleman is no exception, and yet he is exceptional just like all the other guests. And you'll get to learn some things about him in the process of him sharing some key details. But before we do that, we're going to do something especially unique. And we're going to share some testimonials, 2 or 3 among the many that he has. And let's start off with the first 2. The first one I'd like to read is really honoring the gentleman by the name of Max Manat. And I'll see if I can pull it up very quickly here on our screen. This gentleman writes, before working with Devon, I struggled repeatedly with lashing out at my kids and wife, behaving in a punishing, emotionally withdrawn, and cruel manner. In our year of one-on-one work together, Devon helped me to understand some of the underlying causes to my behavior, and through the Men Creating Peace educational material, I understood much more about male-perpetrated violence as a whole. We also worked together with my partner to build check and practices and agreements on a daily and weekly basis. These action steps were very helpful in making positive behavioral changes over our year together. I would highly recommend Devon Gaster and his organization, Men Creating Peace, to any man who is struggling with anger, abuse, and is ready to do the work to get better. Remarkable. We have another one, Edward Martinez. What does Edward write? He even signed his testimony. I'm sorry we can't show his a signature there because that's very personal. But Edward writes, my name is Edward Martinez, and I can honestly say that Men Creating Peace is the reason I am still here today. When I was released, I just picked up the first DV program I could find to get my 42 weeks done and over with. But now I believe I was meant to join Men Creating Peace and to meet Devon. I never thought I was a problem and that the way I acted and the things I did were normal. That it was okay because men get angry. Men don't let anyone disrespect them. They are allowed to be violent because it's the way I was raised and it's all I know. That's what he knew. So after listening and learning from a group of facilitators that truly care and make you feel safe enough to be open, going through the 3 stages and learning about my hitman, the male role belief system, and doing the exercises, I opened my eyes to all the violence and abuse I had committed and some I didn't even realize I was doing. They taught me how to heal and to forgive and how to break the cycle of violence and to find my authentic self. And for that, I owe them more than I can ever repay them in one lifetime. And then he goes on to thank Devon, Eddie, and Scott. These stories are the tip of the iceberg why I wanted to have this remarkable man, leader, professional, and much more, father, husband, community contributor on. And a brief statement about this gentleman. He's the co-founder and executive director of Men Creating Peace. And over the last 23 years, he has educated men about the devastating impacts of intimate partner violence, whether it's in jail, prisons, and in several Bay Area communities. He is former convicted batterer himself, who has been strongly committed to restorative justice and healing. He is a graduate and certified facilitator of the Man Alive. It's a formalized program, violence prevention program. Devon worked for 10 years in the San Francisco County jails, resolved to stop the violence project before starting Men Creating Peace in Alameda County in 2007. He continues to do community outreach presentations throughout the Bay Area on prevention and intervention strategies. And that's not just in community nonprofit centers, but also in the corporate space and educational spaces, higher ed, K through 12. In fact, I had the honor of meeting him and his team and inviting them onto the campus when I was a college president. And it was an invaluable experience for so many men. And I remember one man who went into a space we created that was only for men. No woman, no female could walk into that space. And I remember one of the leads we had in that space came to my office and said, President Webb, you don't know this, but this place is just a genius space for men. I said, what do you mean by that? He says, I have men walking in here and knowing that only men can be in here. And there was a chessboard and they could come in and sit and say or not say anything. And he said, men consistently were walking in there, breaking down, crying. And I said, well, did they share why they were crying? He said, it was obvious. I'm a man. I get it. We're not encouraged to be ourselves, to be authentic. We're not encouraged to be emotional. We're not encouraged to be completely humane. In fact, that is beaten out of many of us. And the men found this space, thanks to Men Creating Peace, as a place where they could be humane themselves. So I got to tell you, it's without any kind of reservation and with a great deal of respect that we have Devon Gaster here. So Devon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. I appreciate it. And thank you to your vision and allowing us to start our program at Laney College those many years ago. We didn't know where we would hold our classes, and you gave us an opportunity to start there. And we've grown since then for 15 years. So I really, really appreciate you trusting us and allowing us to hold our classes there.
Was our honor, because I didn't do it alone. Just because you're a president of an institution, yes, you can make a decision. You've got to have the right team of people who see the vision and are open to it, and more importantly, who champion it. And so that's part of the legacy of that fine institution. I could say the same thing about Stanford, about Berkeley, about Sonoma, about Riverside, all these places, Miami-Dade, Contra Costa, these wonderful places that I had the honor of working in support of, as well as Silicon Valley firms. And when the organizations understand their responsibility for the community, in fact, when the organizations understand that they only exist because of communities, guess what? They do what we did in welcoming Men Creating Peace. So I say to all of you who are running organizations, big, small, nonprofit, for-profit, in, out of the United States, wherever you're at across the globe, leverage. And all of a sudden you see a sea change, the change that we want to experience, that we envision, we're facilitating, and before we know it, we've created it. So I want to ask you a fundamental question I've asked every guest, and that is, share something. What is it about you that we would otherwise not know that you're sharing right now?
So many people don't know that my previous career before I got into this work is I was a florist, or I am a florist. I'm a floral designer. And I spent half of my life doing that work and making a living at that work. I do have a picture of me with a big floral design in my Facebook page, but most people would not know that about me as in this career, because I don't really talk about that too much.
Interesting. And so why florist? I surround myself with plants, and I love orchids and other just beautiful manifestations of just nature. Why a florist?
I really didn't know that I could do something as creative as floristry. It's a long story. I was at school in New Orleans at the University of Loyola, and I had a class I had to do. It was called Career Explorations, and the career I chose to explore was the floral industry. I'd worked in a flower shop as a delivery driver in high school, and so my former boss encouraged me to look into the career, and he said, you know, it's a lot more than just a mom and pop shop like the one you worked in. And I did, and it led me to my first job in New Orleans, working for a florist, and then eventually meeting a woman there who was from Berkeley, and she taught me how to start doing flower design, and she encouraged me to come to California, and the rest is kind of history.
Remarkable. And yet that history led you from that to where you are right now. So you're going to share a little bit more of us in terms of that journey. But what I want to ask you to explain why the title Men Creating Peace for the program. And what does peace mean in particular to you?
So I'll answer the first question, why Men Creating Peace. When I first started the program, I had a colleague who had actually been a student of mine in Marin County. His name was Tom Seipel. And Tom and I were very good friends with the head facilitator at the Marin Abused Women's Services, where I was working at the time, and Tom was a student. And his name was Pete Van Dyke, and Pete Van Dyke became one of my mentors and certainly one of my teachers. And when Tom and I were talking about opening the program in Alameda County, because Alameda County just didn't have a program like this, they had about 13 domestic violence spatters treatment programs, but nothing like we had. And so he encouraged us. He goes, why don't you name it something that's positive, not something like that you're against. At first, we were going to call it Men Against Violence. And then, Pete's like, no, why don't you do something more positive? Why don't you call it like Men Creating Something? How about Men Creating Peace? And that just clicked. And Tom and I were like, that's it. That's the name. And that's what we used. And that's what we moved forward with. Pete is no longer on the planet. He passed away a few years back. But he was very much of an inspirational force in this work and helping us get this program off the ground.
Well, I want to pay homage to him because I've often wondered, why don't we have a Department of Peace in this country? Yet we've got a unit that is militarized for understandable historical reasons. We have a Department of Education for historical and understandable reasons. We've got a Department of, you can name it, and yet we say we're about peace, and there's no infrastructure that's built up around that. And so I find it fascinating because now describe peace for us. And I want to go to this next piece. Go ahead.
So I thought about this, and peace to me means tranquility, calm, the opposite of violence, the opposite of aggression. Being at peace to me is, well, I guess the only way I can describe it, or I can describe it in a couple of ways, the peace of the feeling of sitting in church on a Sunday morning and watching the light come through the stained glass windows and hearing the choir and listening to the organist and knowing that in that moment you are forgiven of all your sins and mistakes, that you are loved, you are accepted no matter where you are on your journey. And that to me creates a lot of peace in my life. And just for that hour, an hour and a half that you're sitting there in that temple or that church or whatever that house of worship is, it gives me that feeling of peace. And another way I can describe it is holding a baby or holding a kitten in your hands and watching that kitten or watching that baby fall asleep in your arms and knowing for that moment you created that safe place for that human being or that little animal to fall asleep. You created that safe and peaceful location where for that moment there's no pain, there's no hurt, there's no fear. And the last one I want to share with you is the way that I relax really is as I go to a hot springs with my wife up in Northern California and sitting in hot water and looking out into the redwood trees and seeing the sunlight come through those redwood trees early in the morning and soaking in hot springs. It's just the most peaceful, tranquil, relaxed, calm place in the world for me. And that really is what peace is to me.
everything coexisting in harmony. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make me think about all my nieces and nephews and godchildren that I love so dearly, independent of whether I see them frequently or even speak with them. Um, you make me think about my dog. You make me think about other animals I love, other people's pets. You make me think about life itself and all of us across the globe and what it would be like if, just like that, we all went to that place and chose to stay there. And I'm saying this not just as a hope, really as a vision. And let's come back to this. So I get why peace is important to you. I want to go to this next testimonial because this is further illuminating the power of what you and your team have done. This gentleman, honoring Darrell Finney, he writes, I can't lie. When I first started attending Men Creating Peace, I was 100% resistant. I felt like I didn't need to be here, and I for sure didn't feel like an abuser. I had the typical attitude of a person not yet ready to expose, accept, and heal his toxic traits. There was even a time or two when Devon, the facilitator, suggested I find another program. He said if I felt so strongly that I didn't need to be there or here, then maybe I should leave. But I couldn't do that. With probation and CPS on my back, I had no choice but to stick it out. I would suggest he did still have a choice. He didn't have to stick it out. It's a little commentary on the side. Over the course of a year, and with a few rough sessions in the beginning, Devon was able to break through my resistance. Attending the classes and actually doing the work helped me realize that the most important relationship, the one I had with myself, was toxic, unhealthy, abusive, and worst of all, it wasn't me. It wasn't with me. It was with who I thought I was, an image I had created to protect myself from the world, an image that was doing more harm than anything else to myself and my loved ones. Now, with only about a month worth of classes left, I can't express how much the class has helped me progress into a better person to myself and others, a better partner, and a better father. I have even reunified with my 1-year-old daughter gaining full custody. See, the program is not about shaming abusers, making us feel embarrassed, or kicking us when we're down. It's not even about learning skills to be a better partner while in a relationship. It's about opening up and identifying with yourself. In multiple layers, it teaches you how to slow down in the moment, gather yourself, and make healthy and positive decisions. It offers the foundation to build a healthy, loving relationship with who you truly are, your true self, and not your hitman image. The skills and knowledge I've gained from my sessions with Devon have helped me overcome difficulties not only in domestic relationships, but in life as a whole. That is powerful. And you said something before we began the broadcast today, Devon. Before I go forward, I want to honor each one of these individual men who wrote those testimonials. In an ideal world, it would be their voices you'd hear, not mine, not filtered through Elnora, Dr. Webb, a female, or anyone else who's not them. I want to honor their powerful voices. You said something about the importance of heart. And George Michael, one of my favorite singers who's no longer here with us on the planet, probably here in spirit, says you'll never find peace in mind until you listen to your heart. And as someone who was a major philanthropic person, most of which we didn't learn about until after he died because he didn't want people to know, he lived that. And that's what these folks are talking about, Devon. And it's this heart connection. Can you speak to that?
No, certainly. So really and truly, what Darrell shared, and I'll just start with him, is that, we talk a lot about a male image. We call it the hitman. It's a persona, it's a mask, it's a false self that we put on every day when we get up and go to work or get up and go out in our lives. It's a way to protect that vulnerability, that little boy inside. And we don't know that little boy inside. We've tucked him away a long, long time ago, sometimes when we're 5 or 2 or 5 or 4, doesn't matter. When something happens to us that we have a traumatic experience, or we're told that we're wrong or we're bad, and we have to take on this image of a real man, then we lose connection with our authentic self, and we take on this hitman persona, this persona of a real man. And you can see it throughout all cultures: macho man, strong, strong, competitive, aggressive, violent, whatever those words you want to put out there. We have 5 words that we talk about: to protect, provide, produce, present, and be perfect. And that's really what this male role belief system teaches us, that as men, we have to do these things, or society won't recognize us as real men. We're less than. And the worst thing that you can be accused of is being less than a man, to be inferior, to be a loser, or to have some kind of a fault, or some kind of a disability, or something wrong with you. And so we pump ourselves up in this image so that we don't look weak, or we don't look wrong, or we don't look inferior. And so that was what Darrell was talking about. But he had been in the life. He had been in the game. He had been taking care of his younger brother since he was very small. His mother was a veteran and was deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq and other places. And he had to stay at home and take care of his younger brother and his younger sister. So he grew up fast, and he grew up in the streets. And he came to me by recommendation of the Child Protective Services when we were down during the COVID time, when we actually had to shut our program down for 2 months. And CPS reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got this client that needs to do these domestic violence classes. He's trying to get custody of his daughter who's been taken due to CPS. His ex-partner had drugs in her system when the baby was born, so CPS took the child." And he said, "I need to do the classes, and I need to show that I can change and be a good father in order to get custody of our daughter." And so we started out, and the first couple of sessions were really hard, really rough. He was very resistant. What am I going to learn from you? You don't know where I've been. You don't know what I've lived through. And I said, "Well, why don't you tell me? Why don't you share with me what you've lived through? Help me to get to know you." And that just softened him. And over the year that we worked together one-on-one through Zoom. And that was something that we started. He was one of the first clients I started working with on Zoom one-on-one during COVID, because we weren't able to meet in the group. And over the course of that year, he just grew. He blossomed into the man that he is today. And I watched him become that father. I watched him, get the opportunity to have his daughter with him. I watched him take on that role. I watched him keep his job for the first time and get benefits and start to pay taxes, and all the things that he had never done before, he got to do. And now he has full custody of his child. And now he has continued to keep a job, and he wants to become a guidance counselor. He wants to become a therapist. He wants to work with young men and women who have the same experience that he's had growing up in the life, growing up in the streets. So that's an amazing story that I can share with you. Max came to me again about the same time because he wanted to get into some kind of a group or some kind of work because of his abuse towards his children and his partner. And he saw our website, and he called and said, "I want to do this, but I don't know how to do this. I can't commit to being at a certain place at a certain time every single week. How can we work together?" And so we work together as one-on-one individual clients early in the morning. Every Friday morning, we would get together at 7:30 in the morning, and we would work together. And it was amazing. One of the other gifts about that was that his wife wanted to be involved. She wanted to give her input. And that usually is something we don't get working in the classes. We don't get the wife or the partner's perspective or view or feedback. And she wanted to be involved in that. And so from the very beginning, she was willing to give me feedback and tell me about his progress or his lack of progress, depending on how the week went. And then they started making these agreements about certain things. And we believe in our program, we believe that agreements are the currency of a healthy relationship.
Say that again. You just gave me chills. Agreements, the
Agreements,
currency.
agreements are the currency of a healthy relationship.
Mm,
Demands
mm,
are the currency of
mm.
an unhealthy relationship.
Oh,
So
wow. We've
instead
got
of
to catch
making
that.
demands on his partner, he started to negotiate agreements with her. And they would negotiate agreements on a weekly basis. And he
Mm,
would check in with me after he would check in with his partner, like that morning or the evening before. She would tell him what her experience had been of the week. And then he would share that with me in our session, and we work on certain issues that may have come up during the week. So that was Max. He decided to go and do some other work, some other interpersonal growth work, and I wished him well. And I'm just so grateful that he was willing to write a testimonial for us. And I actually invited him to watch this presentation. So I hope he does, and someday, even if he's not able to see it now. But he really was a wonderful person to get to watch him transform and grow. And then the last person that you featured, Edward. Edward grew up in the gang life in the Central Valley. He went to prison a lot. He had tats all over him. He was just a very interesting character when he first came to the class, and resistant. Was like, you're not going to teach me anything. I'm just here to do my 52 weeks. And I'm like, well, okay. And we let that happen. We let that, the first class is always free. So we let the men check it out. It's always about choice. So we give them that choice, the free class. There's no obligation if you're pay or join, just sit in and check it out. See what you think. By the end of the class, he was like, I need to be here. This class is amazing. And he was committed to being there. We had the classes on Saturday mornings at that time at the Options Recovery Services in Berkeley. And he came consistently on Saturday mornings and shared with us his struggles and his trials and his tribulations. And at one point he became homeless. Another point he had a nervous breakdown and ended up, in a hospital. He had so many issues that happened during the course of the year, but he continued to persevere. He held in there. We were patient with him. We worked with him, and eventually he got through the program, and he just continued to thank us repeatedly for what he had learned and how he had reunited with his children and reunited with himself and his father and so many people that he had lost contact with over the years of his prison life and his gang life and some of the other things he had done. This is a man who is a famous chef. He is really talented at what he does. And so he was able to kind of balance all those things together and create a different life for himself. Truly a man creating peace.
Mm. As you describe these remarkable men coming from their respective humble beginnings, and even as I read their testimonials and spoke with you previously, I was thinking about all the men I know, all the men I've interacted with, all the men I have observed, and the many, many, many men I will never get to meet on this planet. And the capacity of every man to be their authentic self. And yet, when we talked previously about authenticity, you shared something that humbled me, and I don't know if you. I don't want to state it. I don't want to remind you. I just want you to say what comes to mind when I say all of us had the opportunity to be authentic selves. What does that mean in terms of men? What
Hmm.
do men need to do in order to be able to get there? And we know there are many men who are their authentic selves, and they're doing remarkably well in this society. And yet there's so much that discourages for men from being just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to that moral belief system and the pressure that society puts on us, the pressure our families put on us, the stress level of keeping a job and being able to provide and being able to take care of the responsibility of being an adult male in this world, not just in our United States, but everywhere in the world. There's so much pressure that are put on men to be this kind of fake self, this image of who they really are. And it's very hard for men to be genuine, to be authentic. And as you said, there are many men that are able to do that, and they are courageous and they are brave and they are willing to go against the grain. And that's what it's about, is being willing to go against the grain and being willing to stand up to people who say, oh, get back in the box. You're out of pocket. You're out of the box. You're not a real man. or calling them all the detrimental names that they're called over their lifetime for not being more masculine or not being as tough or violent or abusive, but choosing a different path. And so when I think about authentic self, I really think about vulnerability. I think about humbleness. I think about being respectful, aware of what's going on for you in your body. And that's a big part of what we do in the work, is to help men to drop into their space of their body, learn how to identify their 5 senses and what's going on for them, kinesthetically in their body, dropping into their heart space, being able to identify 8 basic emotions and learning how to communicate and talk about those emotions. Most of the men in this world don't know how to talk about their feelings. And it gets us in a lot of trouble. We're not able to talk about our pain and our suffering and our fear because it's not allowed. That male role belief system says, don't let anybody see you're afraid. It's a weakness. They'll take advantage of you. Don't let anybody see you cry. It's a weakness. They'll take advantage of you. So we are taught to be angry because we can mask that. We can show that in a lot of different ways. And oftentimes we're taught to express anger through violence. But being authentic allows us to step back from that anger and look at what's causing the anger, what's really fueling the anger. It's usually from a place of fear. It's usually from a place of being hurt or sad and not knowing how to communicate that. So we help the men to learn 8 basic emotions: hurt and happy, and then the different emotions that funnel into those emotions: anger, sadness, and fear funnel into hurt. And on the happy side, excitement, passion, and contentment funnel into the happy side, so that they know how to speak about their feelings. And each week when they check in, they're asked, how do you feel out of the 8 emotions today, in the moment? Be real, be in the moment. Tell us what's going on for you. And it helps them to identify it. It helps them to talk about it in a group of men. And then it helps them feel a little more easier to be authentic and genuine and real in that group. Because it's hard to be in a group of men, especially when you're there and you've been painted by this same paintbrush of being a violent batterer, a wife beater. You're a violent man, you're an abuser. And we don't want to be labeled that. We don't label our men that. We label our men as human beings that have made some decisions that didn't serve them, that have hurt themselves and have hurt their loved ones, and that they're really trying to change. We don't want anybody in the program that's not willing to change or not willing to account for their abusive behavior. The first 2 agreements that the men make when they join the class is, I agree I've been abusive to myself and others. And the second agreement is, I agree I am willing to stop my abuse to myself and others. One of the other things that we help men to understand is that when I'm abusive to myself, whether that be through drugs or alcohol or overwork or cutting on myself or driving too fast or any of the different things that we do to self-harm, it's easier for us to do harm to others when we do harm to ourselves. So being authentic is about loving yourself, caring for yourself. And that's another thing we ask the men to check in with every week. How did you nurture yourself this week? What did you do just for yourself? How did you self-care? And when they get to the 3rd and final stage of the program, they have to share with the group what they're going to be doing moving forward to care for themselves. What are you going to do now that the journey is over and the classes are over and you don't have this weekly class to come back to? How are you going to continue this interpersonal growth work? How are you going to build on the foundation that you started with your self-care? And so really and truly, that's what the authentic self is all about. The real self, the true self. Gentle. My authentic self is a gentle, loving, giving man. And that's who I aspire to be. That's who my wife, my beautiful wife, loves. That's who my children love. That's who I want to be. And that's, it shines, it comes through. I'm not always in my authentic self. Oftentimes I go back into my hitman, the justified, vengeful equalizer. But I have to catch myself, I have to say, no, I don't really want to do that, because I know if I stay in that place too long, I'm going to commit violence. I'm going to commit abuse to myself and other people, and I'm going to hurt other people. So it's a fine line. It's a daily struggle between the authentic self and the hitman.
Wow. So many questions came to mind, and all of them seem to be important. I'm going to go with the first one, although I want to go with the last one. The first one is based upon my observation of men who didn't beat their spouses. So we assume who didn't appear to lash out and engage in some outwardly criminal behavior. And yet their behavior was arguably equally destructive in the workplace, meaning that they were they were harmful to the spirits of people. So people were creative, they squashed the creativity. People had ideas and even ideals to complement the organization, they squashed that because it wasn't theirs. They were controlling, they broke systems because they wanted to create something that was only reflective of them. Whatever. What and let's be very clear, not only men do that, some women do that too. But what is it about men that has driven such seemingly impenetrable ways of functioning that's harmful to the actual sustainability of many formalized organizations, not just in this country, but across the globe, that has led to the level of political gaming that is harmful at its core, led to the level of wars that have devastated so many people, that seems to be perennial, ubiquitous if we don't watch it. When in fact, it's not ubiquitous, but it feels that way too often. What do you think is at the core of it?
That's a really good question, Dr. Webb. I think the core of it is fear. I think the core of men's violence across the globe and across time is fear. Fear of not having enough resources, fear of not having enough of whatever. And then when I don't have, or I have that fear that, or I'm living in fear, I have to do something in order to overcome that fear. And so fear leads to greed, and greed leads to behaviors that hurt other people and that take things from other people. So yeah, I believe that the root is fear, and not being able to understand that we can live collaboratively, we can live in community, we can live together, and we don't have to be afraid of each other. We don't have to be afraid of some other company or some other race of people or some other tribe coming and taking our resources, taking our children, taking our wives, taking our mothers, taking our homes. We don't have to live in fear of that. If there wasn't so much greed and fear that men have in their heart, I wish there was a way to do that. One of the things that I see and doing this work is that men tend to be that aggressive place or aggressive force that motivates them. And it's from this place of fear. And if we could be motivated by love instead of fear, that would be such a different outcome. My father used to tell me the greatest motivator is fear. And I understood that. And it is one of the motivators. It certainly is a motivator for people, but it's not the greatest motivator. I think the greatest motivator is love. When I do something out of love, when I do something out of caring for myself and the people that I really care and love for, that's the motivation. That's where I really see things happening in a more positive light, not from a place of fear, not from a place of fear. I think that's also the difference. I didn't mean to interrupt, Dr.
No,
Webb.
you never interrupt.
I think the other difference is between men and women, right? That women are more nurturing, more loving, more caring, and if we as men could emulate that more, if we as men could learn to be more nurturing and more loving and more caring for each other and ourselves, I think there'd be a lot more peace in this world.
Wow. So fundamentally, how were you able to do this for yourself? So we hear about others who've leveraged you and your colleagues to get to where they're at now. How were you able to get to where you're at now?
Sitting in a jail cell for the first time, being arrested, being put in the back of a black and white in front of my 8-year-old daughter at the time, and screaming, "Don't take my daddy away. Don't take my daddy away." Watching the neighbors come out of their house and see me, getting put into the back of a police car and then sitting in a jail cell in San Francisco County Jail eating a cold bologna sandwich and dressed in orange, and realizing I had really messed up. I had really messed up, and not realizing how much I had messed up, not having any idea what the system had in store for me, and having to jump through those hoops of the system, having to hire an attorney, having to go through the court system, having to go to these classes, and having to tell other men what I did, and be accountable for my actions, and to hear from them the feedback that they gave me, and to learn from them. And it was a humbling experience, a very humbling experience of having to go to court once a month, or at the first time it was every 2 weeks. Listening to the judge, listening to the district attorney, listening to my probation officer, listening to the instructor, the facilitator in my early work that I did at the program Man Alive. His name was Eric Camberos. I love him to this day. He was just a wonderful mentor, teacher, and friend. And he really held me accountable, as the other classmates held me accountable. And there was no wiggle room. There was no for me to hide. And at the end of going through the process and learning from these other men and realizing that I had been violent all along in my relationship, this was the first time I had been physically violent to my ex-wife, but I had been emotionally violent and verbally violent and economically violent and sexually violent to my wife for years. And I had destroyed my relationship with her, the woman I loved. I still love her to this day. And today she forgives me for what I've done. We're in a much, much better place. And I believe it's because of the work I've done through this program and the work that I've done on myself and God's grace. And that's all I can say, that she's found it in her heart to forgive me. And we're in a much, much better place than we are today. And I'm lucky. I'm very lucky that God has blessed me with remarkable women in my life that have helped me along the way to teach me and to forgive me. The women that stand out in my life right now, one of them is my Aunt Terry, who, I've known since I was 4 years old or before that. And she's always forgiven me. She's always loved me. She knows some of the horrible mistakes I've made in my life. And she's never stopped loving me or never stopped forgiving me. And she's always told me that, I can be better. I can do better. It's okay. Dust it off. You're human. Everybody makes mistakes. Move on. You can do this. And her encouragement has helped me a lot along the way. My stepmother Bonnie is another one that's just loving and generous and kind in my life. And she sets the example for me to be loving and kind and generous. She was a school teacher for 25 years, and she put up with a lot of stuff. And just being around her and being encouraged by her and the love that she shows our family and the love that she shows my father. It's just an example to me, to grow and to heal. And she's been through this process with me all these years. When I first started, I had first gotten out of jail. It was not long around that time that I met Bonnie, and she never judged me. She never criticized me. And I think that's really the important part of this journey, was not being criticized or not taking on that criticism or that being painted by the same brush as a wife beater, and understanding that I was a human that made mistakes. So, once I graduated from the program, I was encouraged to do some public outreach. From there, I started to train to become a facilitator. I started to do it one time a week. I lost my flower business. I lost it in the divorce. I had to do another career, so I chose this. And I figured that I couldn't heal my relationship. I couldn't save my relationship or my marriage, but maybe what I shared with someone else about my journey, about my transformation, and about what I had learned could help another man save his relationship, could save his family, and that was the motivation. That was why I got into this, was to help others, to help themselves by sharing what I had learned and what I had gained. And that's how it started. And that's how it's continued. And just doors have opened, and people have let me into their lives. And I'm just blessed. I'm blessed to do this work. I'm blessed to be able to touch so many people's lives. I'm blessed to be able to help families heal. And that's really my mission. I think that's what God put me on earth to do.
Wow. You're talking about love. You're talking about nurturing. You're talking about choosing to elevate people rather than tear them down. You talk about accountability at the core. And you talk about the various men in your life who held you accountable. whether they had comparable experiences or not. They held you at a high level. You rose to the level of expectation because you chose to. And then you had invaluable number of women who always supported you, even your initial wife, your first wife who was harmed by you, chose to forgive you, which is powerful. She didn't have to, and she was not obligated to. She chose to. And arguably, I'll add my little 1 or 50 cents to it. By doing so, she saved her own life, and the ability to move forward. I hope people hear what's not even being stated, the embedded truths about this whole journey. Everything is a journey. Even the gentleman you spoke to, we shared his testimonial. Edward, I believe, is his name. Martinez, who's an extraordinary chef and was also heavily engaged in the gangs and harming and being harmed and of harm, seemingly. But he was much more than that. And he had all these dramatic experience working out of where he had been. And arguably, that's what happens. It took a lot to get us where we're at. It's going to take a lot to get us out of there, and yet out of there we can get. And that's the power of what you're sharing. And consistent with what this young lady, who's remarkable, a remarkable professional with a third beautiful child and her wonderful husband, Tony, Tomoko writes, more people need to know about the services Men Creating Peace provides to the public. Devon, Men Creating Peace provides services to train different sections of our or sectors of our society. Many third parties, bystanders, may encounter domestic violence or abusive situations. Many of us do not have the tools to respond effectively. So please share. And with that, I want to do this. I want to place up here what is so, I think, helpful for people to see. And if I can stop the comment as well, you can see the website where you can go if you'd like to get more information. And Devon is clear. He wants people to have his phone number, the office phone number, the email address. If you know of individuals who need this kind of support, if you yourself would like this kind of support, there's confidentiality. You can have a one-on-one. It's all based upon your needs in sync with the conversation you have with Devon and the leadership team. And likewise, this is an organization that's been around for 23 years. And like too many of our nonprofit organizations, and a number of them are going to be featured in the future too, additional ones, this organization receives woefully insufficient funds. But those who do contribute, Devon and the team are extremely grateful. In fact, there is a donation link, the classic HTTPS security link, // mencreatingpeace.org/support dash MCP / for those who are listening and visually not able to see this. So go to that site. If you can provide any support, please contact Devon for more details. And then I want to do what Devon does so nicely, so brilliantly, and honor the board of directors. And you can see there, consistent with the values that Devon has, the organization has, makes it a point to have a diverse board, a board that cares, that has themselves different expertise from attorney to guidance facilitator to a remarkable array of talents these professionals have. And here are the board of directors. Is there anything you'd like to share about them, since you are extremely grateful for each one of them, Devon?
Sure. Yes, thank you. And thank you for acknowledging my board. You know, they are just a wonderful group of human beings who believe passionately about this work. And they come from backgrounds of attorneys. They come from backgrounds of social work. They're teachers, they're school principals. One is the head of security at a very prestigious location. And you know, one is works for another nonprofit here in the Bay Area that does a lot of social development and help and community work. One works with Native Americans in another state, and he was graciously enough, willing to continue to work. As when he left the Bay Area, he continued to be on the board and lend his expertise and lend his service to us. So those are just a few of the people that make up our board. I'm sorry if I've left anybody out, but they are a remarkable group of individuals. And I love them. I love them for what they do and how they support me. And I just absolutely could not do it without them. I did forget about my friend Jenny, who is an attorney who just recently ran for elected office and very narrowly lost in the election, but she is going to continue her fight for social justice. That's her theme. So I hope maybe someday you'll even have her interviewed on this show, because she's a force of nature, that girl.
Awesome. Well, your organization is a force of nature, and that's why men are leveraging it, and more men would leverage it with the right kind of investment. So for any of you who are looking for a place to make significant investment in something that actually is proven consistently to work, Men Creating Peace may be the answer you're looking for, and I hope it is. As you think about that, I want to highlight some of your values, or actually all of your values. You make them very clear and transparent on your website: personal growth, empowerment, accountability, communication, equality. Can you speak to why those particular values? And I think you've already illuminated some, but equality, what do you mean by that, for example? Because we hear equity as a kind of an overarching, because this notion of equality seems to be lacking in terms of ethnic diversity. But what do you mean? Because you may be meaning something qualitatively different. Equality.
So equality, that's a good one. So in this male role belief system, I think many men learn, I know I did, that men have this kind of male entitlement or God-given right to be the superior, to be the dominant role in a relationship, to be the superior, and then the other person in the relationship, whether that be a heterosexual relationship or a same-sex relationship, there's someone in that relationship that has to play the inferior role. And that's what leads to unhealthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm very grateful for is to have my partner, Dr. Alicia Gruffinson, who has been my equal, who's been my true partner for 20 years. We just celebrated our 20th year yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And she,
Congratulations.
she's my backbone. She knows who I am so intimately and so much about me, and she's willing to forgive me when I mess up, and she's willing to call me on my stuff when I mess up, and she's also willing to treat me as her equal. She's a doctor, she's a psychologist, she is head and shoulders above me in so many ways as far as her educational level and her skill set, but she always treats me like an equal person, that I'm on an equal ground with her. And I think that's what we try to work with the men, to treat their partners as their partners, as an equal to them, and not see them as less than, or not see other people as less than, to treat your children as your equal, to treat your coworkers with equality, to treat your neighbors with equality. The golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do to you. And if we can do that, if we can strive for that, I know we can't do it all the time, but if we can strive to treat others as equals, then I think there'll be a lot more harmonious relationships, a lot more peaceful relationships, a lot more love in this world, if you can treat people with respect and equality.
Wow. Simple, so it seems. And I would also say simple and accessible when we decide, right?
Yeah.
You find that fundamentally the men who take advantage of, who leverage, who use the support provided by Men Creating Peace, that there is a shift that happens at some point, and it's when the shift occurs, and that shift is all about them taking responsibility, accepting, even if they don't understand what they're accepting, but when they choose, when they decide to accept, do you see a sea change overnight? Or do you see just a big opening overnight? I just want to have all of us who are listening to this to experience a little bit of what these folks experience? Or is there diverse kinds of reactions as we saw in those or read in those 3 testimonials?
First of all, it doesn't happen overnight. That's for sure. The transformation is gradual most of the time. There's always a level of resistance coming in. And sometimes it takes longer for that resistance to go away or to diminish. And sometimes it never goes away. And oftentimes those are the men that don't complete our program, or we ask to find another program. But the transformation happens gradually and over time. And a lot of times it happens because of an event, something that happens during the course of them being in the program, that they see the difference. They see that behaving in this way and using the tools of the program has given a different result, has created a different result, whether that be getting back with their family, whether that be connecting with their child, whether that be healing a relationship with their father or their mother or their sister, whatever it is, it's a transformation that they see, and then they start to see it gradually. People actually, tell them, I see a change in you, or you're different, or you hear it from your child. You're different, Daddy. I see a big change in you. I'm really proud of you. And that really does it's the catalyst when that happens. And again, it happens gradually. It doesn't happen overnight.
So the part of what came to mind when I was thinking about this broadcast weeks ago, I was thinking, I wonder if there's enough people out there, men and women, who would say, oh, wait, peace, and men being peaceful, men being harmonious, men being, that's really weakness. We got to have real men show up and take care of business, because if they're in that space, they're not going to be strong. They're not going to be solid. They're not going to have a clue. They're not going to drive. And you spoke to this early. I want to end with you speaking to this again. If there is not a correlation or even a causal effect that is positive when someone is being harmful, when someone's being mean, when someone's being hard, when someone's being controlling, in getting the desired outcome that can be sustained in healthy and responsible ways. There can be, and there are many examples of being peaceful, deliberate, thoughtful, respectful, and all these other kinds of values that are about ongoing growth, personal growth, uh, making advances, and actually empowering yourself to even do more, being accountable, communicating openly, effectively, and respectfully. They're great examples of that, leading to the kind of sustainable, healthy results we want. Can you close out speaking to that view that's out there by some? You've got to be hard in order to be a man, in order to take control, in order to make things happen, versus peace is considered you being too soft. You don't know what you're doing. You're too wishy-washy.
Well, just look at how many people are sitting in a jail cell. Look how many people are imprisoned. Look how many people are in graves at a young age. Look at how many men work themselves into an early grave, or are very unhappy and they drink too much, or they use drugs, or they gambling or prostitution, or whatever it is that they numb that pain with. It's about living in that image. It's about trying to maintain that image of the real man. And the men that I know, or the men that I've heard of and looked up to over my lifetime, are men of peace. Nelson Mandela, Dr. Luther King, Desmond Tutu, Indira, Gandhi. These are the men of peace, that have actually made peace and had courageous times and been imprisoned and been persecuted for their peacemaking. They've gone against the grain. They've said, no more. We're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to use violence to get our needs met. We're going to work together collaboratively and in peace and harmony to get our needs met. And they have. But if you look back on some of the world leaders that were violent, Adolf Hitler, Napoleon, Saddam Hussein, they're no longer around, and they are vilified for the violence that they committed and the atrocities they committed and the damage that they committed. So holding those two juxtaposed and looking at those, men of peace or men of violence, which do you choose? Which do you want to be associated with? Do you want to be a peacemaker, or do you want to be someone that's harmful and hurtful and winds up in an early grave, or winds up in a prison cell, or winds up very lonely and out of a relationship? So those are the choices you have. And I choose peace. I'm not always perfect at it. Believe me, you can ask my wife. But I try very hard every day to create more peace in my life. And when I don't, I acknowledge it, I own it, and I try to change that behavior. And I try and grow from that. And I also try and share that with the men that I work with over and over again about, hey, I might have been doing this for 24 years, but I still mess up. I still struggle with my violence. I still struggle with my behavior. I'm not too overly proud of myself to say that I'm perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm always going to be struggling to create more peace in my life. And that's what I encourage the men to do, that they're not perfect, but this is their life's journey, is to create more peace in their lives with their children, with their partners, with their coworkers, with their neighbors, with their family.
Well, it's been an honor. And I honor you, the rest of the team, with men creating peace, envisioning a society transformed from a culture of domination and violence to one of collaboration and equality. It's an honor.
Thank you,
Devon.
Dr. Webb. It's an honor to be with you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And let me just ask anyone, again, who would like to reach Devon, here's the contact information. Take a screenshot. Moving forward, move forward in peace. Why don't?